Hi, everyone. My name is Kristen Pepper. I am an actor, dancer, choreographer, intimacy director, equity member, and chair of the Respectful Workplace Task Force and member of Equity's Member Engagement and Education Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you today to this workshop on mental health and stress management, specifically geared towards our dance membership, but we expect members from all disciplines will get a lot of practical tools from this session. While we're waiting for a few final folks to enter the room, feel free to drop some words in the chat, maybe where you're from, how you're doing today, your mind, your heart, your spirits. Something that I've adopted into some of my committee work is that we share a thought of gratitude. It kind of just sets a nice intention, a nice supportive tone, and an open environment for the work that we're going to do. So if that's something you're inclined to do, feel free to do that in the chat now while we go through our land acknowledgement and our statement of affirmation. Hi, Joe. I'd like to begin as we do with all member gatherings with a land acknowledgement and an equity statement of affirmation. So this is the statement of affirmation. Equity embraces an open and inclusive environment and encourages respectful behavior that affirms the dignity of all individuals. Equity further recognizes our shared responsibility for vigilance in creating and maintaining this environment. Equity recognizes a shared history with Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in Canada. In honor of those who have gone before us, Equity commits to working toward understanding and actionable practices of reconciliation. And a land acknowledgement. I'm speaking to you today during I wrote here beautiful spring day, but it is not. It is gray in Tekaronto, which is situated on land of Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. It's protected by the Dish of One Spoon Wampum. The Toronto region is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations and First Peoples, who have served as stewards of its land and waterways, in particular, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe. I encourage us today to make this an active reconciliation and recognition. Let's take a moment to reflect on one of your favorite places in the country and how its existence and your relationship with it is possible today because of the original caretakers of this land. A personal aside that makes this for me is that I grew up with a cottage on Manitoulin Island, which is situated in Lake Huron. It is the largest freshwater island in the world, and with Indigenous peoples representing 41% of the population. It's home of Wik-Wimikong, which is the largest formerly recognized unceded territory in this country now called Canada. I had the privilege of growing up surrounded by Indigenous arts, culture, dance, and song, particularly with annual Labor Day powwows in the Michigan First Nation. I am grateful for these experiences that have shaped me as a human and as an artist, and I'm grateful for this space today to learn and grow with all of you. And I will pass it and forward it on to Dina.
Hello, I'm Dina Aziz, and also an equity councillor for the region of Quebec and co-chair of the Member Engagement and Education Committee. And I'm very pleased to welcome our presenter for today, Matt Eldridge, who will be familiar to those of you who attended our last workshop on mental health and wellness. Matt is a registered social worker, having completed his master's in 2013. He currently works in full-time private practice. His previous work experience includes being the coordinator and psychotherapist for the Al and Malka Green Artist Health Center, a clinic specifically designed for arts and cultural workers. Matt has a background as a competitive trampolinist and gymnast, and prior to becoming a social worker, performed as an acrobat with the Cirque de Soleil. And Matt offers talks on mental health to share his professional and personal experience in hopes of supporting everyone in their journey towards mental health. Riding sidecar, we have the honor of our moderator, Tanya Howard. Tanya was born in Utrecht, maybe?
Oh my gosh, I
Close?
so appreciate you trying to say that. Everyone just skips right to South Africa. Etenach.
Utrecht.
Close enough.
Closer. South Africa, and
beautiful.
trained at the National School of the Arts in South Africa and Canada's National Ballet School. She joined the National Ballet in 1998 and was promoted to first soloist in 2007. In 2016, Tanya was awarded the David Torrey Award and was awarded the William Marier Award for Dramatic Excellence as the Queen of Hearts in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland in 2011. And just before I pass it on, a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you have a question about something that comes up in the presentation, you can drop that into the Q&A, and Tanya will try and bring that into the conversation, or you can hold that to the end when we hope we'll have time to tackle any unanswered questions. Feel free to use the chat to share resources and ideas with your colleagues. And a reminder that the session is being recorded and will be shared later on Equity's YouTube channel. And now I will go off camera and turn things over to Matt and Tanya.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, was there anything that you wanted to start off with, Tanya, before I launched in?
Maybe I just want to turn around and say thank you to Equity for having this kind of thing. I know we always say, we're working on it, we should talk about it, and the more we do, the more valuable it is. So thank you to Equity for creating this opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm really grateful to be here as well. It's nice to be here with everybody. Let me share my screen because I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I can show you. And I guess I will expand that. Can everybody see that? Does that look good? Yeah.
Yes, for me.
Great. Perfect. All right. So I've already been introduced. I can skip over that. Yeah. So yeah, once again, nice to be here with everybody. So this is a presentation on mental health and mental wellness. We're going to be going over a variety of things today. Specifically, what I was hoping to go over was just some information about what leads to symptoms of big emotions like anxiety and depression. We'll talk a little bit about mental health specifically as dancers and or performers, but also as human beings. I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey with my own mental health, and then a big portion of this presentation will be about some mental health skills and strategies to help with coping and managing. And then I've got a little bit of information about resources at the end if there's anything that anybody wanted to follow up with afterwards. So whenever I do these talks, I do like to just give a little bit of a heads up that talking about mental health sometimes can be a challenging thing. I do tend to keep these talks a little more on the lighthearted side of things. But that being said, like it's certainly a good thing for you to just check in with yourself and make sure that you're staying grounded. And if anything comes up that feels uncomfortable for you, certainly make sure that you're just paying attention to breathing, paying attention to your five senses, distracting yourself temporarily as needed. But again, that being said, like I do tend to keep these talks a little more on the lighthearted side of things. But if anything comes up, I do just want to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. So, what leads to challenges with anxiety and depression? The main model that I tend to go with, we call it the biosocial model. So, what we say is a genetic vulnerability, so a family history with mental health challenges, plus invalidating environments or invalidating experiences can lead to what we call emotion dysregulation or powerful emotions. So, things like depression, anxiety, anger. And like one thing that I always want to make sure to acknowledge is that the environments and systems that we live under, of course, have an impact on the way that we feel on our mental health. So things like our families, our friends, our workplaces, societies, countries, the world at large, all of these things have an impact on our mental health. And so what I want to do is sort of acknowledge that there are, of course, impacts from systems and environments. And at the same time, there are things that we can do to help to try to take care of ourselves as individuals. And specifically, life as an artist is something that certainly can be incredibly rewarding, exciting, and important. And of course, it can also be stressful and inconsistent and come with highs and lows. That you can certainly experience a real mix of validation and invalidation as an artist. And so for our mental health, what we want to try to do is find the right mix of acceptance and validation in our lives with practicing skills to manage everything. And very specifically, as an artist, there are very specific types of invalidation that you potentially could experience. Like being vulnerable, of course, is kind of baked into being an artist. And when we're really vulnerable, like putting out a piece of vulnerable artwork and we're criticized for it, that is a pretty major type of invalidation. Certainly being taken advantage of in any kind of way, never being good enough to someone in a position of power, feeling like you have no control. A lot of artists like have a hard time being able to afford the cost of living. Not winning auditions is something that can be invalidating. So in general, artists certainly can be at risk for experiencing invalidation, which of course in turn has an impact on their mental health. And so when I was working as an artist, I was a trampolinist in a Cirque de Soleil show. I was in a show called Dralion. And it was a very challenging act. So we did an act called Trampoline Wall, where we intentionally started on a 20-foot high wall and then dropped off of it on purpose onto a trampoline and then kicked our way back up to the top of the wall, along with some other things. And I was pretty scared of it at first. Like it was very challenging. But I was doing well at the beginning, but then invalidation started to happen. I actually had a pretty traumatic fall where I slipped off the top of that wall, and thankfully, all that physically happened to me was I lost a tooth. But mentally, it had a real impact on me. And then from there, the expectations on me were pretty high, and I was having a hard time keeping up. And then that from there created some relational conflict with my teammates, team members, and I became pretty dysregulated. I was pretty depressed and pretty anxious. I had a hard time training from there, which in turn affected my performance, which sort of led to more conflict with the team. And so I kind of got myself into this cycle of invalidation. And I think the next slide is just like a picture of me. So here's some pictures of me in Cirque du Soleil. I like to show that picture in particular because it's maybe a bit shocking. But behind that toothless grin was a man that was like pretty depressed and pretty anxious and having a hard time managing everything. Um, and so what I did that I would say did not help, but these are the things that I just kind of naturally did. I hid my struggles from most people. Most people were actually surprised when I finally did tell them. Like I certainly did a pretty good job of keeping that smile on my face despite missing the tooth, but underneath I was really hiding quite a bit. I thought that I was trapped there, like I wasn't really aware of the choices that I had available to me.
Mhm.
I worried all the time. I spent lots of time in bed. I pretty much stayed in bed until the very last minute and then jumped out of bed to get on the bus to go to the venue. And I really, at that time, wasn't aware of skills or strategies that I could try to implement to help myself to feel better. I just kind of did what naturally came to me. And so those were some of the things that didn't help that naturally came to me. Some of the things that did help, thankfully, were keeping in touch with friends and family at home. I was lucky enough to get to speak with a sports psychologist over Skype. I asked for extra support from my coach, and thankfully, I had quite a supportive coach who was very willing to give me some extra help. And then some other things that I just kind of naturally did that naturally came to me were focusing on aspects of the tour that I did like, breathing, taking advantage of time off and trying to find something that I enjoyed in every city that we went to. I really tried to keep myself in as good shape as possible. Like the better that I was at the act, the more confident that I was. And then really tried to practice a lot of grounding, like really tried to keep my body and mind in the present with breathing, with five senses, and just reminding myself to stay present. So at this point, I was curious actually to maybe bring Tanya in and see if you had any thoughts to share about validation or invalidating environments in dance, or maybe any comments about what you've seen dancers already naturally do to take care of their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of things, right? And a lot of these things in a company isn't necessarily vocal. So you might not initially feel it as invalidation, but suddenly you move to the second group or the back line, or you don't do this role, or you don't you perform 1 out of 5 shows, that kind of thing. And so sometimes validation doesn't actually sound like a word because you're not, they're not necessarily talking to you directly. But I was going to ask you about what your grounding was, because I used to say the words to myself, like, I just need to hijack my system, my body, and override what's happening. Because, like with your show and with dancers and ballet specifically, our opening night is a hard finish. There's no shifting that.
Mm-hmm.
The show is that night. So there is a bit of that, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it takes, however you wake up feeling that day, just do it. So I'm interested in your sort of high stakes, what your exercises were that could override that feeling, because sometimes you feel like that at 6:45 and the show is at 7. So there's not a lot of space. You need a immediate override.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I like thinking back on it, I would definitely say that there were things that I did that were helpful and things that were not helpful. Also, like I didn't have the knowledge base around what
Mm-hmm.
grounding meant exactly. Like I was just kind of doing what came naturally. And so like I can remember, so the way that we started that act was we had to climb up a ladder that was backstage to get to the top of the wall. And as I was
Mm-hmm.
climbing up the ladder, I would be thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Oh God, I don't want to do this. So that's not helpful. Like that was not, like that was not grounding, but it was what I actually just kind of naturally did, unfortunately. So in retrospect, of course, what I experienced was a trauma, and trauma can be a variety of different things, and that for me was traumatic. And when we experience trauma, our nervous systems don't want us to go through what we went through in the past. Like our nervous
Mm-hmm.
systems don't want us to repeat the same danger or threat. Like our nervous systems are trained to remember these kind of things. That's kind of good and bad. Like on the positive side, of course, like it's protecting us, but on the negative side, like just staying in the anxiety was causing more harm than good. And it was important for me to ground myself, to bring myself more present, to actually keep myself safer. And so, like, the breathing actually was an important grounding exercise. And I actually had to be taught that by the sports psychologist. Like, he literally told me, you need to breathe. And I wasn't naturally doing that. Like, it was helpful for me to be told, you need to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And like, as funny as maybe this sounds, for me, it was a mind-blowing experience. Like, oh my God, yeah, breathing is important. So, breathing is an important part of grounding. Um, like saying things to myself, like as long as you're focused, you're safe. Like that was a grounding statement to me, which was literally true also. Like I fell because I dissociated, like I kind of blacked out mentally. And so I had to remember, as long as you are focused on what you're doing, you are safe. And when we say pay attention to 5 senses to ground, what that looked like for me back then was I would feel my foot on the ground. I would feel the pressure that I was putting on my leg
Mm-hmm.
in my muscles. So, like, I was really trying to actually pay attention to how my body felt. And, like, the way that this act worked was I started with my right foot in front of my left foot, and then I threw myself off of the wall. So like planting my foot and kind of saying to myself, okay, you can feel your foot. And then from there, like feel the tension in my leg and saying something like, okay, you can feel the tension in your leg. Like that was a really grounding thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also used to um, think of it like, remind yourself of things where you do feel grounded or safe. Like somebody in the chat is talking about gardening, and sort of just I used to stand in the wings, and I was, even the older I got, quite a nervous person.
Uh-huh.
And so after a while, my override, I mean, of course there's 1,000 hours before you stand in the wings.
Uh-huh.
So you have to be prepared. But I would always say, they're playing my song,
Okay.
so that I would remember that it was a service that I got to do, and it
Mhm.
was everyone there was there because they love it and they want to have this experience, and I get to share that with them. So I would always try and um, have deliberate thoughts like that, because what we do as artists is you have to know that there's going to be disappointment. You just have to factor in for that. And
Mhm.
you have to sort of get to this point where I did what I could do, and now it's kind of, I have to put it out there, and then I kind of have to let it go and be open to maybe taking the L. What are the kids saying?
Yeah.
Right? So that you really um you leave that open. Everyone is so pressured to, like, this needs to be the best show of my life, or like, I'm so prepared, nothing can go wrong. But I mean, like, it's all part of life. And
Mhm.
so to have that little fluidity into knowing that not all of this is in my control. And for me, if I did it as an act of service and out of love and generosity, um, if
Mhm.
those are my intentions, it can't be that bad,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, this like veers a little bit, but it makes me think about like things that we can do when we're on stage to help with our just performance anxiety in general. And I like to teach people to try to work on letting go of the attachment to the outcome, which is certainly easier said than done. But like basically what that means is sort of having an openness to things going one way or another. Like it's okay if this works really well, it's okay if it doesn't. Both of those outcomes are okay. And saying that is kind of like a mantra. Actually, when I started giving these presentations on mental health, I used to be really, really attached to people liking me and really buying what I was selling. And I would find it really distressing, actually. Like I would be in person scanning the audience and I would notice that person on their cell phone, or I would notice that person
Yes.
to go to the bathroom. And I would interpret that as, oh, I'm not doing a good job. And so I developed a mantra. Like, it's okay if this goes one way, it's okay if it goes another. Both of those outcomes are okay. And of course, we still want to do a good job and we still want to do our best in general. But if we can let go of the attachment to the outcome, that can be just such a liberating thing and ultimately even maybe help us to be more successful.
Yeah. You know what, actually, I remember we used to spread around, and I don't know if you brought this to the National Ballet in a group session or in a one-on-one with someone, but we started saying, you had told someone, how many times did it go right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because like with your fall, it's so dramatic um, and traumatic that it really stays with you, and it becomes as if you've had that thing happen to you multiple times because you keep reliving it. Um, and we would just be like, oh man, I feel nervous, so I feel like something's going to go wrong, or I'm not locked in, or like you say, with your focus. And somebody was like, well, Matt said, how many times did it go right?
Right.
And then you can, in a way, override also, okay, well, the chances are higher that
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to be able to tap into my skill that I've worked so hard on,
Yeah.
that this could be one of those numbers.
For sure. Yeah, I know that's definitely a good cognitive therapy strategy, which we'll go over in a little bit. It might be a good time to go back to the presentation, but we'll kind of keep going in and out of.
Matt, you will have to get me on a retractable leash. You'll have, I am going to chit chat. So whenever you want to get back to your thing, just let me know.
No, it's great. I think we make a good team here. For sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let me expand the screen again here. Um, and so just like in the vein of like like artists, dancers, performers, and also individual human beings. I did want to just throw out there that there's really no one size fits all when it comes to managing our mental health. Like we all come from our own individual experiences, from our genetics and our family history. We all have our own unique experiences that contribute to our mental health, and there are different options that are available. And like managing mental health, like I would argue, is more of an art than it is a science. Like we have different options and not all of them are going to work for everybody, but what I encourage people to do is sort of have an openness to different options and try to see what works for you. These are actually what work for me as an individual. Like I've been really helped by medication, psychotherapy, connection to friends and family, lifestyle factors like exercise and sleep and diet and having fun and having some challenges in my life. Like we call it building mastery. So like working on a skill, developing some sort of skill. And then the practice of mental health skills. So again, we're going to focus on the skills, but I do like to acknowledge that there's a variety of things that are available, and not everything is going to work for everybody. But I want you to just sort of maintain an openness to different things that could be helpful for you, and keep trying to see what sticks. Okay, so when I go over skills with my clients, I often start with this concept of the window of tolerance. So basically, what this means is, as individuals, we all have just kind of so much tolerance of stress, really. And when we're in our window of tolerance, we're feeling things, but we're feeling them in a more regulated, kind of controlled and grounded way. So we can feel happy, we can feel sad, we can feel anxious, we can feel excited, we can feel guilty, but the level of the emotion is, I would use the word regulated, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, really. And we typically will feel it for a period of time and then come back to a more neutral mood state. Sometimes life can become so stressful for whatever different reason that it takes us outside of this window of tolerance. And on the upper end of the spectrum, we feel what we call a hyper arousal, which I like to describe as kind of like a flooding of emotion. And on the lower end, we call it a hypo arousal, which is more like a numbing or kind of a shutting down response. And you can go in either direction, really. I typically tend more towards hypo, but we're all kind of unique in the way in which we experience this. But the reason why I bring it up as a skill is it's a really important thing for us to try to be mindful of and attuned to within ourselves. Like it's a really healthy thing for us to do our best to stay within our window of tolerance. So what I would encourage people to do is to try to develop a mindfulness over what does it feel like for you to be in your window? Like how do you know what does that feel like? What does it feel like when you're veering outside of your window? Like, are there warning signs perhaps that you can notice in your body that are indicating that you're maybe falling towards hyper or hypo arousal? And then if you have fallen outside of your window of tolerance, like kind of what is that like? Like what do you notice in yourself? Like is it more of that numb, kind of disconnected feeling, or is it more of the flooding and overwhelm kind of experience? And when we're outside of our window of tolerance, we are in kind of a dissociative state. So when we talk about nervous system responses, we tend to talk about fight, flight, freeze. But dissociate, well, there's different words that people will use for it. I tend to use the word dissociate. You might hear words like fawn or collapse. I've just learned for myself to go with dissociate. Um, so this is just when we're not feeling calm or safe or present in our minds and bodies. And it has benefit to it. Like to dissociate means we're not necessarily feeling the full weight or intensity of a threat or a stressor, and that can be good. The problem with it when it comes to mental health is that if we're dissociated or outside of our window of tolerance, our nervous systems are saying that we're unsafe. And if that's not actually true, like if we are actually in safe environments, then trying to be more grounded and less dissociated is, I would argue, a healthier thing, because if we dissociate, we cut off the more positive emotions too. Like we can't really feel happy or connected to other people, and we don't get to have the experiences per se that can actually be good for our mental well-being. So if for the most part we're objectively in safe spaces with good people, it's a good thing for us to work on staying in our window of tolerance and being less dissociated. And one way that I teach people to do that is to use this acronym REGAIN. So maybe a quick anecdote. Actually, on Sunday, like not even a week ago, something happened that took me outside of my window and I was shut down. I was in that hypo aroused state. And so to help myself out, I first had to recognize that. Like I had to say to myself, okay, I'm dissociated. Maybe to expand the story a little bit, I was trying my best to push the feelings away and to try to stay grounded, but I ultimately had just completely fallen outside of my window. So I just had to stop pushing away and just be okay with what I was experiencing and just recognize, okay, I'm dissociated, I'm shut down. And then I had to ground myself by breathing and saying to myself, okay, I'm safe. Everything is okay right now. And then allow means letting yourself feel the feelings that might be underneath the dissociation even. So when I tuned into myself, I actually noticed that I was sad. And so I allowed myself to feel sad. And from there, investigate means trying to figure out why were you triggered? Like, how does it make sense based on your history? And I won't go into full details as to what happened, but ultimately, I did something vulnerable that was invalidated. And so when I investigated and I said that to myself, I said, I did something vulnerable, it was invalidated. That in and of itself was so validating and soothing to myself. Like when we normalize our emotional responses based on our history. So if we can say something to ourselves like, I'm feeling this way and this makes sense because I've been through whatever I've been through in my life, those words are so validating to ourselves and can really be soothing. And then we want to normalize the response that we had, like try not to beat ourselves up for it, try to practice self-compassion. And so this acronym I like is just something to try to keep in your toolkit for if you have those kind of experiences to try to bring yourself back into your window of tolerance. It's not going to necessarily fix everything, but it's a good first step. And then just some other ideas for how to manage dissociation. I like to literally say the words, I'm safe. Doing calming exercises is always good, whatever that looks like to you, like warm baths or aroma diffusers or candles or calm, gentle music. Practice going into a calm place in your mind. So there's a meditation called a calm place meditation that I'm a big fan of. Where just in your mind you go to a place where you feel very safe and calm. It can be a real place that you've literally been to or a place that you've just made up, but just going to a calm place in your mind is really helpful. And then going to literal places that are calming to you is great. I find that being by the water for me is the most effective, and luckily for me, I live not far from the lake, so I tend to go there if I need some calm, and I just find that sitting by the water is for me the best thing. Um, like connecting with safe, supportive people is always good. So there's a term co-regulation, which basically means we regulate our nervous systems in relation to safe, supportive people in our lives. And so connecting with a safe, supportive person does help to ground us. And then practicing scanning our bodies and attuning to body sensations. So what that can literally look like I will sometimes notice tension in my shoulders or maybe in my jaw or in my temples or my chest. And if I'm practicing this, like I'm just gonna be like noticing the sensation and just observe it. And that's it. Because when we're bringing our awareness to our bodies, we're bringing our bodies and minds to the present moment. And it can actually be a soothing or calming thing. Like sometimes when I do that, I might start to tear up a little bit, and that's useful because it's releasing cortisol from my body, and that is a calming thing, which means like moving away from dissociation and towards more groundedness. Maybe I have a couple more slides before I throw it back to Tanya one more time. I just wanted to quickly touch on the skill of self-compassion. So we say that there's a science to self-compassion, and it comprises three things: mindfulness, connection to humanity, kindness to self. So I really see a lot of value in intentionally practicing self-compassion for our mental health. I actually think it's one of the more important skills that we can practice. And it's about relating to ourselves in a kind and empathetic way. Um, so to maybe break down the three elements a little more specifically, if I were to use anxiety as an example, so like you're about to go on stage for a performance and you're anxious. Not being mindful would be trying to put the anxiety away, push it away, or judging yourself for it. And mindfulness is going to ask you to just say, I'm anxious. And that's it. Like we're just being present with it in an accepting and non-judgmental way. Connection to humanity means trying to remind yourself that you're not alone in your experience, that it's a very human experience. So maybe to put those first two elements together, it's I'm anxious and I'm not alone in this. Like this is a very human experience. And then the last part, kindness to self, is just sort of saying kind words to yourself or doing kind things for yourself. So if we were to put all three together, it would look like something like I'm anxious, that's human. I'm not alone in this, and may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I have the compassion that I need for myself in this moment. And self-compassion is really good for what we call vulnerability hangovers. So I'm sure a lot of you are no stranger to this experience where you maybe were really vulnerable, like you really put yourself out there, and then right after the next day, you actually feel kind of hungover, like really exhausted, just really drained. Maybe you have some physical symptoms. Maybe you're starting to question yourself, like, oh my God, why did I do that? And self-compassion really is an important factor with soothing that vulnerability hangover. And I just wrote a little note that says loving kindness meditation there. There's a specific type of meditation called loving kindness that can help with the building of self-compassion. It's just like self-compassionate words that you just offer yourself over and over again. And it's not necessarily easy, self-compassion. Like we tend to be a little easier, or we tend towards the inner critic a little bit more easily than we do self-compassion. Um, but I would make the argument that it's a very, very important thing for your mental health to try to move away from inner criticism towards self-compassion. But that's actually where I was curious to throw back to Tanya, just to get your thoughts about this, like maybe for yourself or just like in the dance world. Oh, I think you're muted, Tanya.
It just keeps coming back to me that my world was so time pressured. So these things almost felt like you could actually say, I don't have time for therapy, or I don't have time for this exercise, or, because we were just always feeling like this looming deadline was coming. And then, I loved what you were saying, the connection to humanity, because that I'm hardwired. I think we all are, but I'm especially hardwired for connection. So I need to meet my fellow dancers. I need to find out what your birth order is when and so it's easy for me to make connections to people. So when I say, oh, I feel nervous. I get a quicker sort of help response because I feel like I've already established this connection with people, which I understand and appreciate. Not everyone feels like, always going up to a party and be like, hi, I'm so and so. What's your favorite color? And it's not easy for everyone to connect and build that community or that support. So there are sort of things that, even though you feel that is not necessarily in your natural way, I feel like there are things that you can't bail out of for yourself. You so like you were saying, you have to learn to breathe. So you have to learn how to connect with people, or ask for support, or do these techniques because they don't just happen naturally for everyone. So I felt with my personality, I had a lot of built-in sort of community therapy in my day because I was able to just talk to people. But a lot of people who don't feel comfortable doing that, I think you have to get comfortable with doing your own sort of self-talk and listening to your, making your own world very supportive to you because I don't know. For me, it's just it's so fast paced at the ballet um, that that sometimes a quieter person could feel overlooked or could feel like this is not the right pace for them. So I kind of like your acronym that it just feels very doable. Just like these little check-ins and um, like word prompts for yourself. Prompts is a good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like your comments about connection are genuinely really important when it comes to the concept of self-compassion. I think too, like if we're gonna take risk in our lives, I don't go into detail about this concept in this presentation, but it makes me think about the concept of attachment theory, which maybe some of you are already familiar with. Like it's basically the science of relating to people, the science of relationships, and we need secure attachments to take risk in our lives. And basically what that means is knowing that we have people who we can reconnect to if we're taking a risk and if things don't go well is something that's really helpful in terms of continuing to be kind and compassionate to ourselves because we basically in our nervous systems even know that everything is actually going to be okay. um, so like leading up to this presentation, even like I was a bit worried about how it was gonna go. So worried about maybe making a mistake or not coming across very articulately. And I've learned to just kind of naturally think, well, who can I return to if I need safety or support afterwards? Um, and that actually helps me to be kinder to myself. And
Mm-hmm.
like not everybody has that for sure. It's something that sometimes we have to build towards. Some people do naturally have it, some people don't. Um, but I like the idea of reminding ourselves that connection is really important for being compassionate towards ourselves and even just thinking, who can I go to if I need that comfort, if I need that safety or support is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's go back to the slides. I hope everybody's doing okay. Got more information to go. Should we pause for questions or anything, or should I keep going and save them for the end? I don't know if there's a preference.
I'll check in with Randy.
Sure.
I think we can keep going.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so Tanya actually alluded to some cognitive behavioral strategies to help with the way that we feel. So there's a type of therapy that I bet a lot of you are already familiar with or heard of it anyway, called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is just a very skills-based therapy that recognizes that our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions are all interrelated. Our thoughts impact our behaviors, behaviors impact our thoughts. Both of those impact our emotions and vice versa. And so the idea there is that if we can work towards shifting thinking and shifting behavior, that helps with emotion. So just like a basic example, say you had a performance where you made a mistake, and then that night you begin to think negative things like I can't do anything right, I'm a loser, and these thoughts start to make you feel sad, and you decide to order a pizza, go to bed early. The next day you call in sick, stay in bed feeling sad. So with CBT, the idea is that we can have perhaps different outcomes despite it being the same situation if we try to be intentional with our thoughts and our actions. So same situation, so the mistake happened, but let's say instead of eating the pizza, you journaled, you practiced self-compassion, you spoke to a trusted person about your feelings. This helped to stop those negative thoughts, and you think to yourself, well, tomorrow's a new day, and I will try my best. And that night you go to bed you get a good night's rest and you feel more energized. So just some basic CBT tools. They often use the term cognitive distortions, but I tend to use the term negative thinking patterns. So we want to develop a mindfulness over experiencing some of these thinking patterns to be able to kind of catch them in ourselves. So just a few examples. Catastrophizing is when we think something is really awful or terrible or dangerous, even if it's maybe not. Black and white thinking is all or nothing thinking, thinking things is all good or all bad. Shoulding is when we have these kind of rigid rules for ourselves and others, like I should be perfect all the time or I shouldn't make a mistake. And magnification minimization is when we magnify the positive qualities in another and minimize the positive qualities in ourselves. Like, oh, that person's so great and I'm not so great, basically. And so with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, what we do at the beginning is we try to work on catching these in ourselves. So okay, I'm catastrophizing right now. And that's it. Like just naming the thought pattern. Okay, I'm shoulding right now, or I'm engaging in some black and white thinking. So we just kind of want to catch ourselves doing that. And then from there, there are some questions that you can ask yourself to maybe try to start challenging your thinking. There's a tool in CBT called a thought record that you can maybe Google afterwards if you're curious, where you work through the challenging of your thoughts. And in a thought record, you can maybe ask yourself questions like this, like, have I had any experiences that show that this thought is not completely true all the time? If my best friend or someone I loved had this thought, what would I tell them? If my best friend or someone who loves me knew I was thinking this thought, what would they say to me? What evidence would they point out to me that would suggest that my thoughts were not 100% true? And when I'm not feeling this way, do I think about this situation any differently and how? And that for me is often a big one because sometimes our emotions are so powerful that it takes over the way that we think. And it often can be useful for us to try to remind ourselves when I'm feeling calmer and when I'm feeling safer, how am I viewing the situation? And then just some other ideas for managing our thoughts. Like if you're a person who maybe tends to worry, and this is especially if there are worries that are maybe outside of our control. Trying to have a worry time during your day can be useful. So dedicating just a bit of time, like 1 to 1:15 in the afternoon, that's your worry time. And then outside of worry time, if a worry pops up, you write it down and you say, okay, I'm not going to worry about this right now. I'm going to worry about this during my worry time. And then try to bring your awareness to the present with your breathing or with your five senses. And then again, if a worry pops up, you write it down and say, okay, not right now, during my worry time. And then continue to sort of do that process of noticing the worry, jotting it down, and practicing mindfulness. And then when worry time comes the next day, you can take a look at some of the things you were worrying about and maybe try to problem solve. And problem solving for sure is a good thing to try to get into the habit of. Like when we're worrying, we're typically thinking about the problems and not so much about the solutions. And so very intentionally trying to practice problem solving is good, along with trying to focus on what you can do to cope too. Like we tend to think about the worst possible outcomes and not necessarily what we can do to cope. And so finding solutions, reflecting on what we can do to cope. Um, and then from there, if you find yourself ruminating on anything, which I certainly am prone to do, practicing distraction is really huge. Like I find distraction to be, for me, one of the more effective tools to help to manage negative thinking. Like just really trying to throw your whole mind and body into something other than what you're ruminating on is really important because ruminating, we're just kind of going through the same thought patterns over and over again and that doesn't help us. So we really want to just try to distract our mind away if we're having a hard time turning off the rumination. Some of you might have already heard of gratitude journaling, but that's just where we spend a bit of time every day jotting down things that we're grateful for. And it's a way of framing our minds away from the negative things in our lives towards maybe the more positive things. And then from there, practicing mindfulness, which is just about being aware of the present in an accepting and non-judgmental way. And if you're maybe a person that doesn't want to do thought records or work on the challenging of the thinking, I think mindfulness is a totally valid and useful approach. So with mindfulness, what we're actually not trying to do is challenge our thinking. We're kind of doing the opposite. Like we're trying to practice acceptance over our thoughts and see them as just thoughts, essentially, like things that are not necessarily good or bad or true or unrealistic, but just thoughts that have kind of popped up into our minds. And there's a meditation that I personally really like where you envision yourself sitting by a stream, watching leaves float by along the water, and then you try to practice placing your thought on the leaf and watching it float away. And then you keep doing that, noticing the thought, put it on the leaf, float away. And it's a practice of observing thoughts, not pushing them away, not judging or criticizing or anything, but just observing. And you can use different imagery, like in this slide, we've got the clouds. You can place the thoughts on the clouds and watch them float away, or bubbles, or whatever kind of imagery works for you. But just the idea is that we want to try to practice just seeing our thoughts as just thoughts and trying to let them come and go in our minds. I'm just going to quickly double check the time. We're at 2:53. Okay. So there are times where our emotions are at a really high level, and that's where things like mindfulness and CBT are not appropriate. We really need to do more practical things to take care of our emotions. And so if a person is struggling with really powerful emotions, I will often introduce the tip skill at first. It's from a type of therapy called dialectical behavior therapy. I use the first three. The acronym in the book is TIPP, but I like to just use the first TIP. So anyway, the T stands for temperature. What that means is really cold temperature can help to reduce the
Mhm.
intensity of an emotion. So taking a really cold shower or holding ice in your hands. Intense exercise, that for sure is my go-to. Like if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I run very fast, very far. And I find the intense exercise to be a really useful strategy to bring my emotion down. And then paced breathing just means very intentionally slowing down the breath. I probably could benefit from doing a little bit of paced breathing right now. I'm noticing myself getting a bit carried away. But yeah, just very slowly breathing in, holding for a period of time, and then just very slowly breathing out. And it's just about slowing down. And then other skills to try to practice when the emotions are at a high level. Distraction, always like just distracting our mind away from whatever it is that we're maybe distressed about. Self-soothing sometimes is important. So just doing things that are calming or soothing. Sometimes people like to put together a self-soothing kit, like just a box filled with items that you find soothing, like soothing to look at, soothing to listen to, soothing to taste, soothing to touch, or soothing to smell. And so just having options available to yourself that you find soothing with your five senses is very helpful. And then one that is, I don't know if abstract is the right word, but maybe a little bit more challenging is to try to practice the skill of radical acceptance. And what that doesn't mean is agreeing with things or giving up on them or approving of them. Radical acceptance really is about trying to practice letting go of the inner struggle and suffering and fight that we maybe experience with whatever is going on in the present moment. So the metaphor is quicksand. So say a person is stuck in quicksand. The more that they struggle and fight, the more stuck they become, and maybe even the more that they sink into it. And so if we're stuck in quicksand, we need to stop struggling and fighting to free ourselves. So the idea with the practice of radical acceptance is that we're just trying to practice accepting the present moment to let go of the inner struggle that we might be experiencing so that we can be freed essentially. And so the first step is to observe ourselves questioning or fighting reality, like saying things like, I don't want it to be this way. I wish it was different. I hate this. This sucks. And then trying to use more acceptance-based self-talk, like saying things like, okay, this is where things are at. This is the present moment right now. Um, and then we want to try to practice accepting with your whole self. So when we calm our bodies, that helps to bring the mind to a more accepting place. Um, and then in terms of behaviors, it can be useful for us to act as if we've accepted the reality of the present moment. So the example that I like to give around that is a breakup. So if somebody is going through a breakup, it often is a hard thing to accept. And so behaviors that you would do if you did accept the facts might be like deleting from social media that person or deleting their number, not contacting them, distracting your mind away if you're thinking about them. So even if you don't necessarily feel compelled to do those things, if you're practicing radical acceptance, we want to figure out the behaviors that you would do if you did accept the facts and then act as if. Um, and then, in order for our bodies to come to a more accepting place, it often can be a useful thing for us to allow emotions to rise and fall within us. Um, I might quickly go through these things because I feel like this is probably a good time to turn it back to Tanya a little bit. I feel like I've been talking for a little while, but I just wanted to quickly talk a little bit about what we call vulnerabilities. So things that
Mm.
make us more vulnerable to bigger emotions. Uh, so things like physical illness or even injury, like if we're sick or injured, that makes us more vulnerable to bigger emotions. We want to work on balanced eating, avoiding mood altering substances, getting balanced sleep, getting exercise, which is often easier said than done, but definitely an important thing to try to work on. And then just to be mindful that there are certain foods that can increase stress, like sugar, alcohol, too much caffeine, which is my worst enemy. I drink too much caffeine, and foods that are low in healthy carbohydrates. Um, and then I just have some information on sleep rules. Like this is actually something that I'm a bit curious about for Tanya because I know like life as an artist is not always consistent, so it sometimes can be hard to have a consistent sleep routine, which is typically what we need to get a better night's rest. So anyway, maybe I will throw it to you at this point just to get your thoughts about vulnerabilities as a dancer.
Yeah, so there, I want to actually just, okay. I have a few things that I'm trying to
Okay.
write down, so I know where this is going. I wanted to, so some of the vulnerabilities thing, you can I don't have trouble sleeping, which nobody wants to hear.
Sure.
Um, but and I know, being a mom, I know I can do anything on 5 hours,
Mm-hmm.
which at first I thought was such a superpower. And then I was like, kind of working backwards. I was like, is this how I want to always be? How long can I sustain this? Even though in this part of my life, it feels like I'm winning because I'm still getting everything done, but and so for me, I was like, actually, I don't care to do things on 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I want to choose something less chaotic than that.
Mm-hmm.
So then you start to rephrase it a little bit and be like, well, actually, I don't care for that stat.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to go back. There are some questions, and I want to see how I can get them in here. But I wanted to, in a little way, pretend that without me getting a free session of you. Um, so for me, rumination was never bad
Mm-hmm.
because am I'm not comfortable journaling. I don't know why. I've practiced.
Mm-hmm.
I keep writing the prompts instead of elaborating. So I don't know if it's a personality thing, but my rumination was where I journaled. in a
Okay.
way where I'd be like, oh, what would I have said differently in that conversation? Or what was my comeback? And then I'd be like, ugh, why would my comeback be so mean? Or what did I, so that's how I would sort of think things through with myself. So I actually had to Google if rumination was good or bad
Hmm.
because I always made it part of my sorting through my junk,
Mhm.
which I always thought was good.
Well, it actually sounds like you're not necessarily fully ruminating because I can hear the problem solving going on while you're doing it. Like you're thinking about solutions and then moving towards action. And like one thing that I probably should have mentioned, which I didn't, is that action taking helps to alleviate rumination. Like, yeah, like when
So
we're
this is
ruminating, yeah, just quickly, like when we're ruminating, we're in a freeze response. Like we're frozen. And so we have to take an action or some actions to get through rumination. And so it sounds like you actually naturally do a good job of figuring out the solution and then taking the action, which can alleviate the ruminating.
but this is why I'm like, I just build community so I can talk to you and be like, hey, Matt, this is how I like, I've been mislabeling that word. And if I had stayed in my little thing, I
Mhm.
might not have said that to you, and you might not have drawn that very little differentiation between the fact that it includes some problem solving. And so it's like, oh, that's not what I'm doing at all. That's a mislabeling of. So in fact, I am actually doing something good. So once I can talk to people about it and I can start to recognize patterns in myself where someone like you can help me say, oh, that's not actually what you're doing. This is what you're doing. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm already good at that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Instead of being stuck with like a label. But there is a question that I want to quickly go to. How do you use distraction as a technique without it becoming an avoidance issue? You touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but
Yeah.
maybe we can just flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think that's genuinely a really great question. And I it's always a subjective answer. Like I think what we need to reflect on in ourselves is is there avoidance? Like is there something that we can do here? And is the avoidance keeping us stuck in the situation? Um like I'm trying to think of maybe some examples that might come to mind. And I don't know, maybe I'll just like give personal examples and risk being overly vulnerable and personal. But like I recently went through real something very challenging that I could not solve in the moment. Like there was a time frame that I needed to wait for. So I could not solve it until a certain date, basically. So there was a while where I was just kind of in a limbo sort of state, essentially. So I was in a situation where I I couldn't take much action, and so I needed to distract to cope with it. Like that was what I was left with. And so there are sometimes situations in our lives where we can't take the action immediately anyway. And so we're distracting as a very important tool, and that's good. Um, but say like I don't know, like with credit card debt, for example, like sometimes we'll get overwhelmed with it and then distract our minds away and then not pay off the credit card bill or work towards getting out of debt. So we're avoiding, and there is a solution that we can maybe try to work towards and try to implement, but the avoidance is actually making things worse. So I think maybe that's where I would go in terms of how to define this. Like if we can tangibly see how our avoidance is making things worse, distraction is maybe something we want to put away and try to work towards implementing the solutions. But if there's a situation where maybe we just can't take the action for whatever different reason, but it's very stressful, then let's definitely distract to cope. Oh, you're muted again.
It's like 2020 all over again, Matt.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry about that. So it might lead into another question where someone is saying, is there a way to practice this radical acceptance idea while still sort of naming or identifying the things that you should actually be working on? So, just I either it could be workplace culture, I guess, or to just being like, well, um, like just in a way avoiding that change that you actually have to make in your life, even though it might be difficult. Just so the radical acceptance and avoiding the change maybe
Hmm.
doesn't overlap or get blurred.
I'm not sure I'm fully understanding. But I guess where my mind goes, and I don't know if this is answering the question, is like so like before we did this call, we did a prep call, and I was talking about the concept of dialectical thinking, like which is trying to hold seemingly opposite truths at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that maybe looks like, I don't know if this is answering the question, but like holding the concepts of acceptance and change at the same time, like sort of knowing that they both need to exist at the same time. So we often need to practice the acceptance in order for us to free our minds up to even think about the change ideas. Like the acceptance is what we often need to calm our bodies and our minds. And then from there, change ideas can even come and we can work towards change. And so we kind of need to hold both of them at the same time.
I think that totally answers it. That you sort of need to get to both places by making space for both things.
Mm.
Yeah, somebody is just mentioning that sometimes they look at distraction as a break from the issue,
Mhm.
and to come back, but needing space, which I think I would um, maybe in more of a layman's term feel like a hobby or an interest. So if
Mhm.
I have something else that takes me out of my stress or my you know what I do in for work, it's nice to sort of have that palate cleanser of a hobby or um, whatever the distraction, and then coming back and kind of feeling a bit fresh to look at your initial scenario with a bit of a different view, or just something that kind of fills your tank and you're like, okay, now I can see this, or um, get back to the challenge of what it is.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, and I actually think that that really helps with defining distraction as a mental health skill because, like, in terms of using it as a skill, we're distracting to lower the emotion to then in turn be able to tackle things. So we want for sure to use distraction as a break, like getting
Mm-hmm.
out the way and definitely hobbies or things that you enjoy are great distractions, and we want to do that, to intentionally distract, to intentionally take a break, to lower the emotion until we're at a point where we can maybe think more clearly. And then from there, we can start to take action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, with your tip or your TIIP, which I think you said it was just tip. Is there anything else for the intense exercise?
Well, I'm a big fan of swimming for sure. That's my thing. And actually, I started swimming recently, and that's become my sport
Oh.
kind of recently. And it's an interesting experience because I have not trained myself well to keep my head in the water. Like I find it distressing. So, like if you're a swimmer, I breathe every two strokes when I'm doing freestyle, and you can keep your head in way longer than that. But the reason why I bring it up is that my head's in the water, so I can't breathe. And so that kind of triggers the fight or flight response, which if we're using that as a way of coping with other things is good. Like I can't ruminate on that other thing because I'm just
You're
surviving.
trying to live.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so it really doesn't matter what it is. Like it could be a personal thing, but like in line with the concept of tip, it's intensity that we're going for. Um,
Right.
and so like if exercise is not your thing though too, like sour candy, like intense taste sensation, uh, like intense music, like we're really just going for intensity with
Hmm.
that specific skill. Yeah.
Thank God,
Yeah.
because I'm not running anytime soon.
You don't.
No, because for dancers, I want my hip flexor long. I need it to be an extension. So
Yeah.
even just imagining that my hip flexor is never going to be in full extension
Right. Yeah.
makes me so anxious.
Yeah. And so I'm gonna get back to the presentation just to get through a few more slides, but that I think speaks to an important point, which is not everything is gonna work for everybody. Like we wanna like sort of, I guess, embrace the idea that there are different things that can work, but we wanna figure out the right mental health self-care for ourselves as individuals. Yeah. Mhm. Okay. So let's see. Okay, interpersonal effectiveness. So the idea is that, of course, our relationships have an impact on our mental health, and the concept of interpersonal effectiveness, like how we define it, is it's about being skillful in getting what you want and need from others, building relationships and ending harmful ones, and trying to find that balance between acceptance and change in relationships, which is so huge. Like we're always going to need to find a balance between acceptance and change with people in our lives. Um, so I might preface this by saying, like, these concepts can maybe seem a bit maybe nebulous at first, but I might encourage you to take them away with you and then see if you can notice how you can implement them into your life. That being said, we say that there's three main priorities that can exist within our relationships: objective, relationship, self-respect. So sometimes we need to get something from other people in order for us to feel good about ourselves and our relationships. So sometimes there's an objective. Maybe we need to get something that we want or obtain some sort of goal. Sometimes the relationship is a priority. Like the goal might be to maintain positive relationships and prioritize how others feel and how they feel about you. And then sometimes your self-respect is a priority. Like sometimes we need to really prioritize ourselves and our needs in order for us to feel good about ourselves so that we in turn can prioritize our relationships. Um, and there are some more acronyms. Everything's an acronym. And some more acronyms that you can kind of keep in mind if you wanted to try to implement some of this stuff. So if there's objective, like the acronym is MAN, stands for be mindful, appear confident, and negotiate. I think the mindful one is the more important one to stay focused on. Like sometimes we're not getting what we want or need from another person. And if it's something that's really important, we want to stay mindful of it and keep coming back to it. Like we use the term be a broken record. Like I still need you to do this for me. I still need you to do this for me. So maybe like a simple example might be if you have a roommate and they're just not doing the dishes and you've said it many times and it's an important thing for you. Like we want to find, of course, the balance between acceptance and change. But if this is a genuinely very important thing for you, let's be mindful of it and keep coming back to it. And then hopefully if they start doing the dishes, that's great. That's good for your mental health and it's good for your relationship. But then sometimes we want to prioritize the relationship itself. Like we want to prioritize the other person's feelings and how they feel about us. And so just a simple acronym to keep in mind is GIVE. We want to be gentle. We want to act interested in them. We want to validate them. We want to use an easy manner. Um, like an example that maybe comes to mind is if there's somebody important in your life who you maybe have some resentment towards for whatever reason, but you're trying to work on the relationship with them, then we want to try to be gentle or act interested or validate, use an easy manner. And then maybe the more challenging one for a lot of people is the concept of honoring our self-respect. Like sometimes people in our lives like maybe treat us disrespectfully in some sort of way. And it puts us in a position where if we're going to care about our mental health and even have a healthy relationship with said person, we've been put in a position where we need to honor our self-respect. And so FAST is the acronym for that one. Like we want to try to be fair, like validate our feelings and theirs. A big one is no apologies. And that's the one that I encourage people to really keep in mind with this. Like you have the right to your opinion and you don't have to apologize for it. Stick to your values, like don't sell out, be clear about what you believe and stick to your guns, so to speak, and be truthful. So don't lie, don't act helpless when you're not, and don't exaggerate. And so with these three priorities, any or all of them can kind of exist at any given time. But the idea is that we want to be mindful over how are we feeling in relation to another person or other people. If we're feeling off or not great, what's missing? Like, is there an objective? Is relationship a priority or is your self-respect a priority? And then from there, when we're talking to them, we want to try to maybe keep some of these acronyms in mind to help us to find the words. And then I like this document. It's more so for if you have a hard time expressing your thoughts and feelings. These are just kind of positive coping thoughts to help you with it. So you have a right to need things from others. You have a right to put yourself first sometimes. You have a right to feel and express your emotions or your pain. You have a right to be the final judge of your beliefs and accept them as legitimate. You have the right to your opinions and convictions. You have the right to your experience, even if it's different from that of other people. You have a right to protest any treatment or criticism that feels bad to you. You have a right to negotiate for change. You have a right to ask for help, emotional support, or anything else you need, even though you may not always get it. You have a right to say no. Saying no doesn't make you bad or selfish. You have a right not to justify yourself to others sometimes. You have a right not to take responsibility for someone else's problem. You have a right to choose not to respond to a situation, and you have a right sometimes to inconvenience or disappoint others. So this was like kind of an interesting topic. We only have 10 minutes left, so we might have to like quickly have a little chat, Tanya, but just curious if you had any thoughts about that part when it comes to being a dancer.
I love all that because it's nobody told us that. Nobody reminded us that we have these rights within a studio because it's so hierarchical that, the choreographer or the coach, they can always override your feelings. I was actually told to leave my personal life at the door.
Hmm.
And and then afterwards I realized, I was like, but she's the one that's going to stand up for me in this scenario, so I can't leave. But it was in the end I discovered it was problematic for me to leave parts of me and just come in like this vessel for people to create on. And then my big thing was also, which I'm just hearing over and over with everything that you've read, is to remember, well, for me, that even though I was incredibly committed to this art form and I love it with my marrow, it is still what I did and not who I am.
Hmm.
I am a lot more than just this one thing. So fill in all the like I do have the right to say no. Even though it didn't always feel like that in the studio because of whatever external pressures, I would go away and say that, like, I'm still the person who could say this.
Hmm.
And just to remind myself that in my reflection of who I am, these things are true. Right now, in the reflection of what I do, some things might be out of my control in this moment. And paying the bills still has to happen sometimes. And that's really hard for some people to make some choices. To, not everyone can say, well, I'll just leave this job and go somewhere else. So,
Hmm.
but for me to have that very strong sense of myself to say, outside of the things that I can't control, these things are very true about me.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Nice. Cool. Okay, so I will like quickly end. Uh, I just had one small slide about choosing a therapist if you decided that you wanted to try that out. The main factor that's related to positive outcomes in therapy is what we call the therapeutic relationship. So if you're looking for a therapist, it's a good thing to do consult calls with them. Like a lot of therapists will offer a free 10 to 15 minute consultation, and it's a good opportunity to just kind of get to know the person a little bit and to see how you feel. And that's the main thing that I would encourage you to prioritize when looking for a therapist is the connection. Like, is this somebody like who will understand me, who can get me, who like I can feel safe with? Yeah, and then just a few quick resources. So if you're curious about cognitive behavioral therapy, there's a website called Center for Clinical Interventions that has free CBT workbooks. This Palouse Mindfulness is a website that has free mindfulness exercises. If you're in the Toronto area, the Alan Malka Green Artist Health Center has some great physical and mental health resources. My practice is just called Matt Eldridge Counseling. And then I know that like there are people from across Canada here, so I just posted the link to Government of Canada mental health services, and it's a pretty good webpage. It has different services by province broken down on there. So if you're curious about mental health resources in your area, check out that website. Yeah, cool. All right, we made it to the end. Look at that.
Well, actually, we can add one more question. My thing says we have 7 minutes.
Sure.
So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to read the whole thing because it's got some good wording.
Okay.
Any advice for feeling overwhelmed by the expectations that others have for you? I feel like I feel like I will never do enough to satisfy the artistic staff at my ballet company. I want to work hard and accomplish all that I can, but the fear of falling short makes me feel frozen.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that that is a complicated experience to have with different layers that requires like a complicated answer, which I'll do my best to give, really. Um, like I would definitely lean into the self-compassion stuff. Like that's really important because like I guess like to think about that systemically once again, like if the system is giving you this message that you're not good enough, it makes sense you would start to internalize that message that you're not good enough. And so to so to speak, combat that from within, practicing self-compassion is a very important thing. This is kind of abstract, but I like thinking about metaphorically separating ourselves from the systems that we're in to try to think a bit more clearly about who we are as an individual. So, like a quick example, I'm a little on the neurodivergent side. You might already tell, but like when I worked in corporate healthcare, like I used to work in the hospital, the way that that system is set up is just not for me. Like I was constantly being like told in different ways that I need to do things differently in terms of like the management piece that I was involved in. And I would start to think, yeah, there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. But then I would kind of metaphorically separate myself from it. I guess another way of saying that is I would remind myself of my strengths and positive qualities. And I would start to say, whatever. Like, I mean, I have a master's degree. Like, I was in Cirque de Soleil. Like, I own my own practice. Like, I have a lot of positive qualities. So, no, like, even though I'm doing things differently, it doesn't mean that I'm bad or wrong. And so I know that this is maybe a bit abstract, but kind of metaphorically trying to separate yourself from that and remind yourself of your strengths and positive qualities is good. And actually, in that Center for Clinical Interventions website, there's a self-esteem document. And within that document, there's what's called a positive qualities journal, which is just sort of an opportunity to write out all of your positive qualities, and there are questions that prompt you. So that certainly is very, very useful. I think I could go on and on here. Like practicing mindfulness is definitely good. Like when you're actually at the company rehearsing, like just trying to be very present. Um, And then I guess the last thing that I might add for now is the connection piece, like really trying to lean into the positive, healthy connections that you have, because we really do feel and are more regulated in relation to safe attachment figures. So, like, ideally, if you're working at a company, the leader is a secure attachment figure. That's ideal. Like somebody who's safe, supportive, says positive things. You can go to them if you're having a hard time with anything. Of course, that's not going to be the case a lot of the time. And so, because we're getting a negative attachment figure, we need to find ourselves positive, safe, secure attachment figures that we can go to receive the regulation that we need to then in turn return to the sort of risky area. So I might actually say that's probably the thing that I would encourage the most. I try to lean into the safe, supportive, secure attachment figures to get support so that you can keep going back to the risk area. Yeah, I know that's not everything, but like there's more that I could say for sure. But I think just in the interest of time, I might pause there. But hopefully that provides some help.
I'll just add a little bit too, to say I could have written this question at multiple times in my 25-year career. There's always that little feeling of doubt or of, I'm not their taste, but do remember it's just taste. Um, but so as Matt is saying, like separate, just turn the volume down on this a little bit and remember that you're a professional dancer, you're an expert in this. So you can yourself tell the difference between a good pirouette and a bad pirouette. So if you do a good one, you know that. You don't have to wait for somebody to say, "Oh, that pirouette was good." You'll be like, "Yeah, I know." Because I train, like I can look at it on as a stat. So you have to learn to turn up the volume on your own expertise, what you know is a good run through, or and then for me, I just loved dancing and I loved ballet so much. It gave me so much back. So if I did my solo and, my coach was like, meh, I'd be like, really? Because I feel great.
Mhm.
So I just really try to lean in, as Matt's saying, on the positive support thing and not to doubt yourself too much. You've trained a long time. You have the expertise to know what a high arabesque looks like, a successful pirouette. And if you're doing these things, they need to count for something in your own mind.
Nice. Cool. All
Oh,
right.
look at us, 3:29.
Crushed it. I don't know if is Kristen or Dina or anybody gonna come back. Yeah, there's Dina. Yeah.
That was terrific. And I think that's a really wonderful note to leave things on, the idea of turn the volume up on the stuff that feeds you the good things and turn the volume down on the things that are not constructive or feeding into negative self-talk and doubt and anxiety. And I really appreciate this. This has been really terrific.
Yes, we wanted to thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and we haven't done a workshop in this kind of vein in a long time. And I think this really helps serves our members and gives them, an additional tool in their toolkit to for their personal lives and also their professional lives. So just wanted to thank you both for a wonderful presentation and discussion on this topic. It was a lot of information. And I know we'll be sitting and downloading a lot of that. So we also we have recorded this. So we're going to put this up on the Equity website in the coming days. So feel free to circle back. And if there's anyone that was here that thought this would be great for someone else, please forward it along. And thank you to everyone who took the time out of their Saturday to attend. A reminder, if you missed any of our previous workshops, you can always check them on the Equity YouTube channel as well. And finally, please take care of yourselves, especially some of this information could be activating. So please take care of yourselves and your colleagues and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy spring, everyone.
Thank you, Matt. That
Thanks,
was really
everyone.
very appreciated.
Bye.